"You've got to be kidding me," my mom said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Madison is the one who's always thinking of us. Why would you try to take that away from her?" I sat there, my mouth slightly open, while Madison, perched confidently on the edge of the couch, gave me a smug little smile that made my stomach churn. "My name is Samantha Myers. I'm 29 years old and I work as a marketing consultant. To most people, I'm the reliable, level-headed one in the family, the one who gets things done without needing applause. That's why, a few months ago, I decided to leave $10,000 in my parents' mailbox as an anonymous gift, just to make their lives a little easier. The only person I told was my younger sister, Madison, a struggling artist who's always been the center of attention. I never imagined she'd turn around and claim the gift as her own, basking in the praise of my parents and everyone else. At first, I didn't say anything. I figured it wasn't worth the fight, and maybe, just maybe, Madison would come clean on her own. But weeks turned into months, and every time we had a family dinner, my parents would gush about how generous Madison was, how lucky they were to have a daughter like her. The more they praised her, the angrier I got. It wasn't about the recognition. It was the fact that she let them believe a lie while I sat there biting my tongue. The worst part? I couldn't even prove it. I hadn't thought it through when I left the money. I just stuffed $10,000 in cash into an envelope and dropped it into their mailbox. No cameras, no notes, no traceable bank transactions, nothing. It was supposed to be anonymous after all. I never imagined I'd need to prove that it was me. So, when I finally snapped at Sunday dinner and said, "Actually, I'm the one who left the money," the room went dead silent. Every eye turned to me, filled with disbelief. And Madison? She just sat there, her face a perfect mask of shock, as if she was the one being accused. My mom was the first to speak, her voice sharp and defensive. "Samantha, that's ridiculous. Why would you say something like that? We all know it was Madison. She's been so thoughtful, and we're so grateful for her help." My dad nodded along, looking at me like I'd just said the most absurd thing he'd ever heard. "There's no reason to make this into a competition," he added, his tone disappointingly dismissive. Madison, of course, played the part perfectly. "I can't believe you'd try to do this, Sam," she said, her voice trembling as if she was genuinely hurt. "I mean, I know things have been tense between us, but this? Really?" She glanced at our parents for support, and they were quick to jump in, reassuring her, while I sat there in disbelief. It was maddening. She wasn't just lying, she was doubling down on it, and everyone was eating it up. I clenched my fists under the table, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm not trying to start a competition," I said, my eyes locked on Madison. "I just want the truth out there. I was the one who left the money in the mailbox. You're taking credit for something you didn't do, and it's not right." Madison shook her head, her expression a mix of disbelief and pity, like she couldn't believe I'd stoop so low. "You don't even have proof, Sam," she said, her voice soft and condescending. "Why would you leave cash like that? That doesn't sound like something you'd do. And honestly, it feels like you're just trying to ruin this for me because you're jealous." The words stung, and I could see my mom frowning as if Madison had a point. I realized then that no matter what I said, they were too wrapped up in their image of her to even consider the possibility that I was telling the truth. My mom sighed deeply, shaking her head as if she was dealing with a child throwing a tantrum. "Samantha, this jealousy is getting ridiculous. Madison has always been so thoughtful, and instead of being happy for what she's done for us, you're trying to tear her down? It's really disappointing." My dad chimed in, his tone annoyingly patronizing. "We love you, Samantha. Even if you didn't give us money, you don't have to compete with your sister for our attention." He gave me a pitying smile, like he was doing me a favor by forgiving me for something I hadn't even done. Meanwhile, Madison sat there, looking hurt but smug, her hands folded neatly in her lap. The whole thing felt surreal, like I'd been thrown into a bad sitcom where the truth didn't matter. I couldn't take it anymore. The disbelief, the condescension, the smug look on Madison's face. I'd had enough. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor, and glared at all three of them. "You know what? You're being absolutely ridiculous," I said, my voice sharp and unsteady from holding back everything I'd been feeling. "You're so busy fawning over Madison that you can't even consider the possibility that she's lying. But one day, you're going to realize the truth, and it'll be too late." I turned to Madison, who was still sitting there, looking like the innocent victim. "And you," I said, pointing a finger at her. "One day you're going to regret what you've done. Maybe not now, but when you need someone to trust, someone to lean on, you'll realize you've burned the only bridge that mattered." I didn't wait for their response. I grabbed my things and walked out, slamming the door behind me. I wasn't going to sit there and let them paint me as the jealous liar anymore. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. My relationship with my parents became painfully cold. The usual texts and calls dwindled to almost nothing. And when we did talk, it was distant, like we were strangers navigating polite conversation. Madison? I didn't hear from her at all, and honestly, I didn't want to. Every family event or gathering, I found some excuse to skip. The thought of sitting in the same room with her, pretending like nothing had happened, was unbearable. The only person I could lean on was Katie, my best friend. One night, over a bottle of wine at her apartment, I finally let it all out. "I don't know what hurts more," I said, my voice cracking. "That Madison could do this to me, or that my parents were so quick to take her side?" Katie didn't interrupt, just listened, nodding with that empathetic look she always gave when I needed her the most. "It's like all the years I spent trying to be the good daughter don't even matter. They'll always choose her." Katie reached over, squeezing my hand. "You don't deserve this, Sam. None of it. You did something selfless, and they couldn't see it. That's on them, not you." Her words helped, but the ache in my chest didn't go away. A few months later, I visited my grandparents, hoping to find a little comfort away from the tension with my parents and Madison. But the moment I walked in, I could feel something was off. The usual warmth wasn't there. Instead, I was met with awkward nods and forced smiles. As I sat down, I overheard my Aunt Linda murmuring to one of my cousins, "It's just sad, isn't it? You'd think Samantha could have been happy for her sister instead of trying to cause trouble." My stomach dropped. I turned to look at her, but she quickly looked away, pretending she hadn't just said something loud enough for me to hear. My grandmother, sensing the shift, tried to smooth things over, handing me a plate of cookies like that would somehow fix the tension. "You know, sweetie," she said gently, "Madison's been so good to your parents. It's really inspiring how much she stepped up for them." My chest tightened as I realized Madison had poisoned the well. They all believed her version of events, and I was the ungrateful troublemaker in their eyes. I stayed just long enough to be polite, but by the time I left, the lump in my throat felt like it would never go away. Leaving my grandparents' house that day felt heavier than I expected. The words I overheard replayed in my mind like a broken record, each one stinging more than the last. It wasn't just the unfairness of it. It was the realization that Madison had gone out of her way to tarnish me to people who were supposed to love me. It was infuriating, but more than that, it hurt. And when I got home, I sat in my car for a while, gripping the steering wheel and staring at nothing. The worst part wasn't just that my family believed her lies. It was knowing that no matter what I said, they'd already made up their minds. Sitting in my car, I reminded myself of the cold, hard truth. There was no way I could prove it. I had been so focused on making the gift anonymous that I hadn't left a single shred of evidence. No receipts, no bank transfers, nothing. Just an envelope stuffed with cash dropped into their mailbox. And since everyone believed Madison, what could I do? If my own parents didn't trust me, what chance did I have with the rest of the family? It felt like I was screaming into a void, and no one cared enough to listen. The reality was painfully clear. There was nothing I could say or do to change their minds. All I could do now was walk away and try to rebuild my life without their approval. As I sat there staring blankly through the windshield, a single thought kept looping in my mind. I needed a miracle. something out of the ordinary. Something that would turn the tables and finally make them see the truth. It wasn't enough to just walk away. I wanted justice. I wanted them to know who I really was, not the villain Madison had painted me to be. But what could that miracle even look like? I had no proof, no way to back up my side of the story. For months, I'd stayed quiet, trying to keep my dignity intact, but now it felt like silence was my enemy. Something had to give. I just didn't know how or when, but deep down, I held on to the hope that someday, something would happen to expose Madison for who she really was. Just as I was spiraling in my thoughts, my phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I grabbed it, expecting a spam notification or a random update. But when I unlocked it, my heart skipped a beat. It was a message from Madison. "Hey, Sam. I really need to talk to you. It's important." I stared at the screen, my emotions swirling between anger, suspicion, and curiosity. Madison hadn't reached out to me in months. The timing couldn't have been more surreal, but I couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in my gut that whatever she wanted, it wouldn't be good. Still, a part of me couldn't resist the urge to find out what she had to say. I stared at Madison's message for a long moment, my thumb hovering over the screen. Every instinct told me to respond right away, to demand to know what she wanted. But then I stopped myself. Madison had spent months twisting the narrative and letting everyone think the worst of me. She could wait. I put my phone down and decided not to let her urgency dictate my response. Whatever was so important could wait until I was ready. The next day, after a long night of restless sleep and careful consideration, I finally replied, "What's so important, Madison? Make it quick." I wasn't in the mood for games, and I wasn't about to let her think I was eager to hear from her. Madison replied almost instantly, like she'd been waiting for my response. "Can I come over? I really need your help, Sam. I'm in a tough spot." The tone of her message was pleading, which wasn't like her. Madison rarely admitted to needing anyone, let alone me. I debated for a moment before typing back, "What kind of help are we talking about?" I wasn't about to let her waltz in and dump her problems on me without a clear explanation. Whatever this was, I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into another mess. Not again. Her next message came quickly. "I'm struggling financially. I can't keep up with everything, and I don't know where else to turn. Please, Sam, just hear me out." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head at the irony of it all. Madison, the golden child who could do no wrong, was now coming to me for help. The same sister who'd lied to our parents and dragged my name through the mud was suddenly desperate enough to ask for my assistance. Part of me wanted to ignore her, to let her deal with the mess she'd made. But another part, the one that still wanted some sort of justice, knew this might be the opportunity I'd been waiting for. I typed back, "Fine, come over tomorrow, we'll talk." If she wanted my help, she was going to have to play by my rules this time. The next afternoon, Madison showed up at my door, looking nothing like her usual self. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun, her face pale and drawn, and she was wearing an old hoodie I hadn't seen in years. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her, but then I reminded myself why she was here. "I didn't know where else to go," she said, as I stepped aside to let her in. She sat on the edge of my couch, fidgeting with her hands, avoiding my eyes. "Things have been really hard, Sam. I'm behind on rent, my credit cards are maxed out, and I can barely afford groceries. I don't know what else to do." I leaned against the wall, arms crossed, keeping my tone steady. "So, you're asking me for money?" I said bluntly. She flinched, but she didn't deny it. "After everything you've done, you think I'm just going to bail you out?" The room was silent except for the faint sound of her breathing, and I could see her struggling to come up with the right words. Madison looked up at me, her eyes wide and desperate. "I've already asked everyone else, Sam. Friends, acquaintances, anyone I could think of. I didn't want to drag Mom and Dad into this, and I figured I couldn't exactly go to the rest of the family after..." She trailed off, looking down at her hands. I raised an eyebrow. After what? After lying to them for months about something you didn't do? I asked sharply. She winced but didn't argue. So, let me get this straight. You've exhausted all your options and now I'm your last resort? The sister you lied about and threw under the bus? She nodded slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. I know I don't deserve it, but I didn't know who else to turn to. Please, Sam, I'm begging you. For a moment, I just stood there staring at her, weighing my options. A part of me wanted to slam the door in her face, but another part saw an opportunity, a way to finally set the record straight. I took a deep breath, shaking my head as I looked at her. No, Madison, I said firmly. Her head snapped up, her eyes widening in shock. I'm not giving you money, not after everything you've done. She looked like she was about to cry. Sam, please, I wouldn't be here if I had any other choice. I'm desperate. I'm sure you are, I said, my tone cold. But you made your choices, Madison. You lied to our family, you threw me under the bus, and now you expect me to help you out? That's not going to happen. I crossed my arms, standing my ground. For the first time, I felt no guilt, just a sense of clarity. Madison stared at me for a long moment, her shoulders slumping as she realized I wasn't going to change my mind. She stood up slowly, grabbing her bag with trembling hands. I get it, she said softly, her voice heavy with sadness. I know I messed up and I don't deserve your help. I didn't know where else to go. She paused at the door, glancing back at me with red-rimmed eyes. I'm sorry, Sam, for everything. I really am. Her voice cracked on the last word, and before I could say anything, she opened the door and stepped out, closing it quietly behind her. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the empty space she'd left behind. I wasn't sure what I felt, relief, maybe, or just exhaustion, but I knew I'd made the right decision. A few days later, my phone buzzed while I was in the middle of making coffee. I glanced at the screen and saw my dad's name. It wasn't often he called me directly, so I answered, curiosity and a little apprehension building in my chest. Hi, Dad, I said, trying to sound casual. Samantha, he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. We were hoping you could come to dinner this Friday. Madison's asked to see us all, and she says it's important. Your mom and I think it would mean a lot if you were there. I froze for a moment, my mind racing. Madison? Important? It didn't take much to figure out this wasn't going to be a normal family dinner. Did she say what it's about? I asked, my tone guarded. No, just that it's something she needs to do in person, he said. Please, Sam. It would mean a lot to all of us. His voice was calm, but I could sense the unspoken plea in his words. I hesitated, but eventually agreed. All right, I'll be there, I said, though part of me was already bracing for whatever was coming. Friday evening, I pulled into my parents' driveway, my stomach churning. I sat in the car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, trying to steady my thoughts. Whatever Madison had planned, it was clear this wasn't going to be a simple family dinner. After taking a deep breath, I grabbed my bag and headed inside. The house smelled like my mom's pot roast, a familiar scent that usually brought comfort, but tonight only made my stomach tighten further. As I stepped into the dining room, I saw my parents, my grandparents, and Madison already seated around the table. My grandparents smiled at me warmly, but there was an unmistakable tension in the air. Madison looked down at her hands, fidgeting nervously. My dad stood as I entered, giving me a hesitant smile. Samantha, glad you're here, he said, motioning to the empty chair next to him. I nodded silently, taking my seat, my gaze flickering to Madison, waiting to see what this important meeting was really about. Just as the awkward silence began to stretch, Madison let out a shaky breath. Before anyone could react, she broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. Her shoulders shook as she buried her face in her hands, the sound echoing in the room. My mom gasped, rushing to her side, while my grandparents exchanged confused looks. What's wrong, sweetheart? My mom asked, placing a hand on Madison's back, her voice full of concern. My dad leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Madison, what's going on?" I didn't move. I didn't need an explanation because I already knew. Watching her unravel, I felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, vindication, and an odd sense of pity. This was it. She was cracking under the weight of everything she'd done. I stayed silent, waiting to see what she'd say next, the tension in the room so thick it was almost suffocating. Through her sobs, Madison began to speak, her voice trembling but loud enough to silence the room. "I can't keep lying anymore," she choked out, tears streaming down her face. "The $10,000, it wasn't from me. It was Samantha. She's the one who left the money in the mailbox." She paused, her chest heaving as she tried to collect herself. "I took the credit because I wanted to feel even more loved, more appreciated. I've never felt like I was in anyone's shadow. Mom and Dad have always protected me, always supported me. But I wanted more. When I saw what Samantha had done, I was jealous. I wanted to be seen as the one who could do something that big, something that meaningful." She glanced at my parents, her face pale and full of regret. I didn't think about how much it would hurt her, or what it would do to all of us. I just wanted to hold on to that feeling of being special. And when Samantha tried to speak up, I lied again. I panicked because I didn't want to lose the way you looked at me. I didn't want to lose being the one you were proud of. Finally, she looked at me, her voice breaking completely. "I'm so sorry, Sam. You didn't deserve any of this. I was selfish, and I let it go too far." She broke down again, her head in her hands, as the room fell into stunned silence, everyone too shocked to speak. As Madison spoke, I sat frozen in my chair, a storm of emotion swirling inside me. Anger, vindication, disbelief, sadness, it all hit me at once. Hearing her finally admit the truth after all this time should have felt satisfying. But it didn't. Instead, there was a hollow ache in my chest, a reminder of everything her lies had taken from me. My relationship with our parents, my place in the family, my peace of mind. I glanced at my mom and dad, their faces pale with shock, their eyes flickering between me and Madison as they tried to piece it all together. They looked devastated, but I couldn't find it in me to feel sorry for them. They'd chosen to believe her over me, and now they were seeing the fallout of that choice. Part of me wanted to scream, "I told you so," but I stayed quiet, letting Madison's words hang heavy in the room. This was her moment to face the consequences, and I wasn't going to take that away from her. But still, as much as I wanted justice, I couldn't shake the hurt of knowing it took her this long to finally come clean. My mom was the first to speak, her voice shaky and thick with emotion. "Samantha, I don't even know what to say," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "We were so blind, so quick to assume you were just being jealous. We never even considered that you might have been telling the truth. And now I see how unfair we've been to you." My dad nodded, his face pale and full of guilt. "We should have listened, Sam. We should have trusted you instead of shutting you down. I can't believe we let this go on for so long. I'm so sorry for everything we said, for doubting you. You didn't deserve that, not from us." They looked devastated, their regret plain on their faces. I could see my mom's hands trembling as she reached across the table, her voice breaking. "We let you down, sweetheart. We're so sorry. Can you ever forgive us?" Their words should have brought some comfort, but all I could feel in that moment was a mixture of sadness and exhaustion. They were sorry now, but the damage had already been done. I glanced over at my grandparents, and the sadness on their faces was unmistakable. My grandmother's lips were pressed into a thin line, her eyes glistening as she looked down at her hands. My grandfather shook his head slowly, his expression a mix of disappointment and heartbreak. They didn't say a word, but the weight of their silence spoke volumes. They couldn't believe what they'd just heard. Days went by, and I couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened. Madison's confession, my parents' apologies, the way my grandparents had looked at me, it all replayed in my mind like a movie I couldn't turn off. I thought about Madison, how broken she'd seemed, and for the first time, I let myself see past the anger and hurt. She'd made a mess, yes, but she was finally trying to take responsibility. Maybe, just maybe, she deserved a second chance, not through money, but through guidance. After a lot of thought, I called her. "Madison," I said, my voice firm but calm, "I've decided to help you, not by handing you money, but by helping you figure out how to get back on track. We'll sit down, go over your finances, and organize a plan to fix this, but only if you're ready to take it seriously." She was quiet for a moment before she agreed, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. It wasn't forgiveness, not entirely, but it was a start. And for the first time, I felt like I was taking a step toward healing, not just for me, but for both of us. After everything, I felt lighter, like a weight I'd been carrying for a long time had finally been lifted. The anger and hurt didn't disappear overnight, but I no longer felt trapped by them. I'd stood my ground, found my voice, and taken control of my own peace. For the first time, I felt like I could move forward, not for anyone else, but for myself, and that was enough.